Hey everybody, Madison here with Health by Ratio, and in this week's video, we are going to finally end the age-old debate of what's more important, mobility or stability, range of motion or strength. We're going to talk about this and finally boil down what we should be prioritizing. Health by Ratio is a online team of licensed physical therapists, orthopedic movement specialists, and functional health coaches that work together to create holistic programs for our clients to help them rehabilitate and stop recurring pains and injuries and bridge the gap back to the active and abundant lives that they love to live. So, for those of us that are either interested in or working in the health, wellness, fitness space, there has been an age old debate between physical therapists and body workers and personal trainers and yoga instructors on what is more important. Mobility, should we be focusing more on flexibility, range of motion, that kind of stuff? Or stability, should we be working more towards strength training, exercise, balance, that kind of thing? And I want to talk about this topic and really kind of end the debate. And the short answer is they're both incredibly important. Now, I'm not going to leave it at that. It's not just like, well, just do both. I'm going to get more specific with this. And ultimately, I do feel that there is one that is ultimately more important than the other for our long-term health. But let's dive into this topic a little bit and get on the same page with what we should be focusing on, depending on what stage in our health journey we are. Are we recovering from an injury? Are we trying to improve the overall movement of our body and maintain the longevity of our joints and tissues for decades to come? Are we feeling healthy and we're looking to just become more athletic and a better version of ourselves, whether that's stronger, leaner, faster, whatever? So let's break this thing down. So first and foremost, mobility becomes, to me, the first priority when we are actually missing what's considered normal ranges of motion. There are certain typical degrees of motion that each of our joints should have, and it's relative to each person. There's a window of it. Not everyone should have a perfect 90 degrees at their hip flexion or whatever you're looking at, but there is a range that we all should be able to, in theory, get to, with very few exceptions. And so when we're missing those ranges of motion, or I would even argue more importantly, when there are significant asymmetries, meaning we have one of the left hip that has significantly more range of motion. For instance, this is a simple external rotation assessment. So if I got one hip that can open up to a certain position versus the other hip is tight as all get out and I can barely get to this thing, that asymmetry is something that we really want to address, because that's going to pull on us differently from right to left when we're moving throughout our day-to-day life. So if we're missing range of motion, period, and there's a variety of different ones. The ankles move in multiple different directions. The knees move in one. The hips move in multiple different directions. We have certain flexion versus extension at the lumbar. We have certain flexion versus extension versus rotation at the upper and mid back. We have certain ranges of motion with our shoulder girdles and our neck and all of the above. If we're missing those, or one side is significantly different than the other in terms of our range of motion, then that needs to be addressed first. Because if we don't have the range of motion to do an exercise correctly, if I don't have proper ankle range of motion, if I can't dorsiflex, which is the range of motion where I pull my toes up towards my shins, then I'm not going to be able to do a deep squat. It's not possible. Like I have to have that ankle range of motion to get into that position. So if I don't have the range of motion, I can't do the exercise correctly. Not everyone needs to be doing a deep squat like that, but my point is that we need certain proper ranges of motion to be able to do an exercise correctly and recruit the muscle groups correctly on the stability side of things. And if we have one side of the body that's doing one thing versus the other side of the body is doing another thing, then we're going to have some real big challenges. Those single-sided asymmetries are what are directly linked toward the majority of injuries, tweaks, and chronic pains on the physical side of the body. So The first thing is we got to assess. We got to see what's actually going on with the body and actually verify, do we have the proper ranges of motion, and are we relatively symmetrical between the left and the right hand sides with each of these joints? How do we assess? We can look at things like our normal movement patterns, how we sit down, we stand up, we squat down to pick things up, we bend over to pick things up, we kneel down to grab something, or how we walk, how we run. And then we can start doing certain tests on individual ranges of motion of the joints. When we start seeing deviations, we can see, all right, is that happening at the ankles? Is it happening from the hips? Is there something going on up here at the shoulder girdle? And often it's multiple things. We'll see, the right ankle is having a challenge here. The left hip is having a challenge there. The right hip is having a challenge in another spot. The left shoulder is doing this. The right shoulder is doing that. But when we see those connections, we can say, all right, now we know what we need to mobilize. Now, I'm going to go into stability in just a second, but if that's something that intrigues you, if you feel like, yeah, I'm either really tight in certain areas or one side of the body is significantly different than the other, and I want to understand where the connections are, how this is impacting me, this is what my team and I actually do for free in the various video assessments that we offer everybody. So if you'd like to connect with us, you can click below this link and it gives you access to our calendar. You can pick a day or time that works best for you. This is a totally free call. We will connect with you first on a quick phone call just to understand what your body's been through, what kinds of treatments, techniques you've tried in the past, what's worked for you, what hasn't, as well as what your goals are, what you want to actually achieve. And then you and I will connect over a video call where we run through a number of these assessments and see how and why your body is doing what it's doing in applicable ways to how you live your life. And then we break down what's happening so that you're on the same page and create a game plan together on what specific mobility techniques versus what specific stability exercise techniques you need to do to move your body back to full ranges of stable motion. So if you're interested in that, feel free to click below on the calendar. Now, let's continue on to the stability side of things. So like I said at the beginning, one of these two is ultimately more important than the other, and that is stability. Now, the reason why I say that is I can do as much massage work on my body. I can get as many massage treatments as I want. I can do as much stretching as I want. I can do as much range of motion, flexibility, improvement work that I can think of. None of that is going to teach me how to squat differently or walk differently or lunge differently or kneel or any of my daily movement patterns. It's just not going to translate to training my central nervous system how to move any differently. It's kind of intuitive, right? If I get a massage and I get nice and loose, did that massage therapist teach me how to pick something up differently? No, they relax tensions out of my body. Now, I might have a deeper range of motion in my ability. Like now, I might be able to bend over a little bit further to grab something or be able to rotate to grab something a little bit further because I have added range of motion. But I'm going to still potentially have similar compensations as I did before. So, like for instance, if I had tensions on certain parts of my body that consistently taught my body to squat, sit down, stand up asymmetrically. I always load to my left leg as I go down. Well, I can do all the mobility work that I want, but my central nervous system has been taught to do this for years on end. Chances are, even if I do all the range of motion and work and I'm now symmetrical, I'm still going to squat like that because it's just been a pattern that's ingrained into me. It's what my body's used to. So that's where we have to stabilize the body correctly. We got to balance it. So once I have the range of motion, I need to start functionally strengthening it so that I'm teaching my body how to use these ranges of motion correctly. And this doesn't have to be with intense stuff. Like I don't have to be busting out my kettlebells and dumbbells and doing the intense heavy lifting. It can be body weight work and resistance bands or lightweight. It can be stuff that's just translating to how we garden or how we are doing work around the house or how we hike. All the above are what we can be kind of focusing on, like applicable movements to what we're doing on the day-to-day basis is what we can focus on in our strength so that it translates to us moving with these ranges of motion correctly again. And harmoniously, we're using the whole body the way that it should. So stability ultimately is the priority in the long run. That's what keeps this body happy. Now, we need to maintain our ranges of motion. Now, the beautiful thing is if we move in full ranges of motion on a regular basis, If we're constantly throughout our day getting up and going in and out of full range of motion on my ankles, full ranges of motion on my hips, and all the different variations that they can do, all the ranges of motion in my shoulders and my neck and all that good stuff, well, then chances are I'm not going to have to do so much mobility work. I'm not going to have to do as much static stretching, as much massage work and stuff like that. Might occasionally, but I'm not going to have to do this quite as much because I'm hydrating tissues more and I'm training these muscle groups and these connective tissues to go through full ranges of motion every single day. So it's going to maintain that. Now, if we have a job that requires us to sit for long periods of time, or we drive a lot, or we're doing certain repetitive movements over and over, I love playing racquetball, so I'm consistently rotating to one side when I'm playing. So I have a repetitive movement that I do on a regular basis. Well, then, yeah, I'm going to have to use some of these tools probably for throughout my entire life, just a little bit each day to maintain it and keep my ranges of motion symmetrical and where they should be. But for the most part, if we do this grunt work initially and we mobilize the body correctly, we restore range of motion, then often we can maintain 80, 90, 100% of that range of motion just by doing full range of motion functional stability work on a regular basis. So ultimately, this needs to become a priority. But to be able to do that correctly, we got to do this stuff too. So that is the actual debate. We solve it. We finish it. Both are important. We need the range of motion to do this stuff correctly, but ultimately we need to do this stuff correctly to use the range of motion correctly. So they're interconnected, and it depends on where you're at with where your body's at. If you're just coming off of an injury, if you're dealing with recurring injuries, especially single-sided random things that keep getting tweaked or whatnot, then we need to assess. We need to see what's going on with the body. That's what my team and I are here for. If you'd like, we'd be happy to help. And that's where we're going to prioritize initially restoring balance to the body in its ranges of motion. And then very quickly, we bridge that gap to stability. Now, these things are not mutually exclusive. While I'm mobilizing the body, there's often some great stability work that I can do. And while I'm doing stability work, that doesn't mean that there's not a little bit of mobility work that I can do to maintain it. It just depends on where are we putting more of our time and energy into with our maintenance work. I don't think it needs to take much per day. I've found from my own body, as well as the thousands of people my team and I have worked with, about 10 to 20 minutes a day on like mixed in between either of these two equations. 10 to 20 minutes total is all we need to do to get this body moving back towards full range of stable motion. Once we achieve that, then about 5 to 10 minutes a day is all it takes to maintain it. So it's pretty simple. Body just needs a little bit of love, and it'll treat you really well for the rest of your life. All right, guys, if you have any questions, comments, leave them in the comments below. Feel free to like, subscribe, follow us on our platforms, whether that's YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, so you can see our weekly content that we're always putting out. Talk soon.